In 2026, the Internet began to look backward. I observed this not as a historian, but as a student of the psyche. Washed out filters and forgotten memes resurfaced, a sudden flood of old images into a present that felt, to many, overwhelmingly saturated. This is a signal. The phenomenon is an act of regression, a necessary psychic retreat from a present configuration of endless noise and fragmented meaning that has become intolerable. When consciousness is overloaded, it does not advance. It instinctively circles back to a position where symbols felt coherent and tension was manageable. The immediate, personal stake is exhaustion. The news summary describes a digital world in 2026 burdened by endless content and outrage, where symbols multiply until none hold weight. The psyche's law is clear. Faced with such saturation, psychic energy lowers, and the unconscious seeks relief by simplifying. The return to the aesthetic of 2016 is therefore not a casual trend, but a symptomatic return to fewer symbols, to a time when the digital persona was a lighter mask, not yet a prison. This nostalgia is the psyche's way of asking a quiet, urgent question about the cost of our current noise. But this instinctive retreat is only a diagnostic. It points to what is missing: play, simplicity, symbolic coherence, but it is not a prescription to live in the past. The critical task now is to understand why 2016 functions as this specific destination for our collective regression. What symbolic position does that year hold that makes it the chosen site for this psychic relief? This regression to a past configuration is a search for a comprehensible system. The news describes 2016 as a time when the Internet still seemed playful rather than predatory, and when the world still appeared to have edges. These are not just technological memories, they are reports of a specific symbolic coherence. The system's laws, the algorithms, the norms of identity were perceptible, not yet hardened into an invisible, overwhelming totality. The contrast with 2026's saturation, with its endless content and outrage, is stark. One system is navigable, the other is a noise that drowns out meaning. The stakes here are collective and civic. When a shared symbolic landscape fragments into infinite, weightless self-reference, the basis for common understanding erodes. The unconscious retreat to 2016 is a signal that the present configuration has become intolerable for the psyche's need to orient itself. It is seeking a position from which the laws of its world can be seen again. So what, precisely, are we trying to recover in that image of 2016? The resurgence of washed-out filters and forgotten memes signals a collective retreat from a present where symbolic coherence has collapsed. This is not a conscious choice, but an instinctive movement toward a time when the psychic burden was lighter. In 2016, algorithms existed but had not yet hardened into invisible authorities. Meaning had not yet fully collapsed into irony. The nostalgia is for a configuration where one's digital identity felt less like a prison and more like a manageable mask, where participation did not demand constant vigilance. You can observe this mechanism in miniature daily. I notice a specific fatigue, the compulsive checking of feeds not for connection, but from a numb habit, a search for a signal that never arrives amidst the noise. It is the exhaustion of a self perpetually performing for an algorithmic audience. This longing points to a critical loss, the playfulness and symbolic simplicity that make a shared world comprehensible. The stakes are the vitality of our collective psyche. But if this regression is a symptom, what does it diagnose about our current symbolic poverty? Consider the exhaustion that makes a decade-old internet meme feel like a sanctuary. The current saturation, the endless content, the outrage, the self-reference is not merely a technological condition. It is a state of symbolic overload. When symbols multiply until none hold weight, as the news notes, the result is a collective lowering of psychic energy. This is the necessary law of a strained consciousness. Faced with an intolerable present configuration, it seeks relief not through advancement but through a return to a simpler symbolic order. This instinctive retreat to the image of 2016, where the digital persona felt lighter and participation required less vigilance, is therefore not escapism. It is a signal from the unconscious. The psyche, like a strained system, simplifies under pressure. It circles back to a point where meaning had not yet fully collapsed into irony, seeking to recover a comprehensible framework. The danger, however, lies in the seduction of this simplification. To mistake the nostalgic memory for the required medicine is to risk a permanent regression, refusing the growth that a conscious integration of that lost simplicity would demand. We must ask, then, if this retreat is the psyche's natural response to overload, what are the inherent tensions of remaining within its comforting but ultimately backward-looking embrace? This instinct to simplify, to return to the comprehensible past, serves a vital purpose. The resurgence of forgotten memes and washed-out filters is a signal that the present configuration of endless content and symbolic overload has become intolerable. Regression is a necessary psychic function, offering a temporary harbor from the storm. But a harbor is not a homeland. The seductive trap lies in mistaking the memory for the medicine. To remain in nostalgia is to refuse growth. It is to choose the comfort of a fixed symbolic past over the demanding work of integrating what that past signifies. The concrete risk for 2026 is that we could collectively trade agency for comfort, choosing the lighter digital identity of a decade prior rather than forging a new symbolic coherence for our own time. The past illuminates what is missing, but it cannot provide the blueprint for what must be built. So the pressing question becomes, how do we translate this signal into a viable future? So the psyche has signaled its exhaustion by reaching for the washed-out filters and forgotten memes of 2016. This is the act of recognition. The recovered position, that moment when the internet still felt playful rather than predatory, shows us precisely what has been lost: a symbolic environment where meaning had not yet collapsed into irony, where the digital persona was not yet a prison. This is not a lesson about technology, but about the human capacity for play and coherence within a shared symbolic space. The concrete fact of this nostalgia, the return of low-resolution videos, the longing for a time of fewer masks, provides the necessary datum. It is the suggestive fact that allows us to diagnose the present. We do not need the past itself. We need to understand the principle its image reveals. The principle here is that a viable psychic life requires a comprehensible world, not an endlessly saturated one. If we ignore this signal and treat the nostalgia as mere comfort, we commit a profound error. We would be attempting to cure a sickness of symbolic overload by consuming more of the same old symbols, which only deepens the exhaustion. The task is integration, not repetition. The internet needs to remember why 2016 felt alive so it can synthesize a future that is not a return, but an evolution incorporating that recovered humanity. If we fail to listen, we condemn ourselves to a perpetual enervating retreat, mistaking the memory for the medicine until even the memory loses its meaning. The past illuminates the lack, making a different future possible.